Hello, my name is Liam Fraser, and I am part of the American History course in grade 11 at Bill Carruthers Secondary School. The president I chose to research is John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He was in office from 1961 to 1963 and is recognized as the most influential president in history. The first influential event that occurred during Kennedy's reign of leadership was the Bay of Pigs. This was a war between the Americans and the Cubans that resulted in a loss for the Americans. With this new war coming to a start, many questioned the strength and power Kennedy held as an individual. Many said he was quite over his head with the troubling scenarios at hand. Kennedy had made a speech saying he wanted to invade Cuba due to the change of leadership in that they made and how the new leader had changed the relationship between the two. Previously, Fulgencio Batista had ruled power over Cuba, and the land was under peace and serenity, but soon overruled Fidel Castro turned the country into mayhem with not only the Bay of Pigs but also with the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Bay of Pigs is a small bay of water just inside Cuban territory, thus being the Bay of Pigs. The difference with this war was that the American CIA ran it. The CIA agents trained and prepared Cuban Americans to evade the native Cubans and create peace among the lands, although this went horribly wrong. What Kennedy and America would have thought be a simple win against such a small country was most definitely not. The Americans first learned this when they were held off completely on the first day, and by the second a significant amount of soldiers captured. This had been a terrible loss for the Americans that Kennedy came soon to realize. Castro had been successful in holding off the Americans, thus making a fool of Kennedy's confident decision to invade Cuba. Kennedy then felt the heat of American eyes on him and brought his shoulders home. He made many speeches regarding the Bay of Pigs event and accepted the responsibility for it. Acknowledged, Kennedy publicly acknowledged the work of the Americans who fought in Cuba and made it clear that he was nothing but grateful. He started his run of office not with the best stats but wholehearted. The second important event that occurred under the leadership was the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a part of the Cold War that was between Americans and the Soviets. America had weapons pointed in the direction of the Soviets and European countries at the time, and the Soviets felt they were under pressure to respond to that. So they decided to get their missiles in a place close enough to America that could strike any part of the U.S. with efficiency and accuracy. So the Soviets contacted the leader of Cuba at the time, Fidel Castro, and asked them for the opportunity to put missiles in the country. The Cubans accepted the offer, and the fight was on. Kennedy was aware of the challenge at the time and made aware to the general public. They were strongly dependent on Kennedy to resolve the issue before anything catastrophic could occur. He prepared more missiles to be set up in Europe to advance the previous threat they once posed. Along with that, he set up a blockade for Cubans attacking the United States. In that blockade, he also stated that if the Cubans were to attack at any time, America would immediately retaliate towards Cuba and to the Soviets. Although the Soviets took their response as an additional threat and made it clear to America that there was a possibility for a nuclear war. This whole issue then was sat down and spoke about throughout the White House. The result of this was MAD, Mutual Assured Destruction. The Americans and Soviets realized that they had the potential to destroy the Earth with the vital nuclear power they had and immediately remove weapons from one another. The final and most successful event that Kennedy had accomplished during his leadership over America was the win of the space race. The space race was a competition between the States and the Soviets. Some say the Soviets won with putting the Sputnik into outer space, but Kennedy had other plans. He's going to put a man on the moon. The two men he had for the job were Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. With the approval of the president himself and NASA, Kennedy made his promise a reality. The Apollo 11 was launched on July 16, 1969, and was the most accomplished day in American history. The Apollo 11 had landed on the moon July 20th, and the space race had been won. Neil Armstrong planted the American flag and declared the win to the world. Kennedy had been successful. He was the first president to put a man on the moon, and he would be greatly remembered for it. Along with that, the two astronauts and the Apollo 11 would be the greatest achievement in human history to date. And with Neil Armstrong landing on the moon came the very famous line, "That's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind." Along with those prior three events, here are two parts of Kennedy's life that were also major. The first one is the assassination of John Kennedy. Kennedy was riding the back of a convertible in Dallas during a presidential motorcade when the assassination occurred. He was shot in the head and was immediately killed. His wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, quickly fled the vehicle and got to cover before she ran back over and cradled his lifeless head. The alleged killer was Lee Harvey Oswald, but he was killed before he could stand trial for the assassination. The death of John Fitzgerald would be one of the most devastating days in American history, and his death is still mourned to this day. The second event would be the phenomenon known as the Kennedy curse. This is so-called curse states. The Kennedy curse is a term sometimes used to describe a series of events involving members of the Kennedy family. This curse is stated to be true due to the death of numerous relatives of John Kennedy. His wife Jacqueline Kennedy died of lymphatic cancer at the age 64. His brother Robert Kennedy was assassinated in 1968. John's second brother, Ted, died of brain cancer that also worked in office. And John's last brother, Joseph, was an American soldier and died in action. But the most well-known and talked about death was the one of John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. John Fitzgerald Kennedy is a world figure and brought a new aspect of life to Americans. His innovation to send a man to the moon and his overall win of the Cold War would prove that over time in office, he was a significant president. The accomplishments he conquered were some of the greatest the world's ever seen. John Fitzgerald Kennedy is potentially the face of American identity.